Autism is classified as a severe speech and language disorder.
0.6% of kids have autism. That means 60 out of every 10,000 kids have autism.
Symptoms of autism include difficulty in social interactions, the use of language, strange use of language, very concrete and inflexibility, agitation, overexcitation, and racking,
as well as repetitive behaviors. Genes.
No single part of the brain has been associated with autism. Doctors think that many different neurological disorders and social dysfunctions are related to the brain, but it has not been related to a single part. Chromosome 17 also plays a huge role in the disease.
And there could also be an oxytocin dysfunction. If one to meet the criteria for autism, the other was 60% of the time autism. Identical twins help to show that genetics have a large part in autism. Compared to other diseases, autism seems to have a high genetic relation.
In a pair of identical twins, if one identical twin is autistic, there is a 60% chance that the other one will as well, which therefore signifies that autism is probably involved with genetics. Biochemicals. GABA neurotransmitters work by manipulating electrical potential in neurons. GABA works with excitation, inhibition, and the brain.
Oxytocin affects personality traits such as trust, reading emotions, and enhances some social interaction processes. Oxytocin could help individuals with autism become more social.
Cells.
Mirror neuron in prefrontal cortex is in charge of planning, reasoning, and judgment, and is also involved in the personality and emotion by contributing to the assessment and control the appropriate social behaviors.
There is reduced mirror neuron activity in the inferior frontal gyrus in autism.
Mirror neurons are a set of neurons that control actions. Mirror neurons not only respond to our actions, but they respond by seeing a person doing the action. For example, we feel someone drinking less water and we can mirror that action. Mirror neurons could be related to many symptoms of autism, including socialness and reading faces. Understanding mirror neurons can help to understand what controls autism and how it's caused.
Babbling in infants may be how a child trains its mirror neurons with matching words with pictures similar to feelings. Mirror neurons might even be a necessity for processing emotions. Synapse apathies, where the synapse is the part of the brain that is disrupted in autism, as well as the disruption in the dendritic spines. Brain anatomy.
Some say that the prefrontal cortex helps to control social impulses. Cases show that damage to the prefrontal cortex can cause social abnormalities, much like those in autistic kids. Another important part is the amygdala. The amygdala is involved in portraying emotions, learning, and processing fear. A lack of these attributes are in autistic children.
People with autism also have increased cervical thickness in their brains. In autism, there is an increased transverse relaxation of brain cells. Transverse relaxation is a measure of how tightly bound brain cells are. In autism, the brain cells are less tightly bound.
Enlargement of the amygdala contributes to increased brain size observed in autism and social-emotional functions.
There is a 5-to-1 boys to girls ratio in autism. It is very hard to understand. It is interesting because autistic people with a very low IQ have a ratio of 10-to-1 boys to girls, while autistic people with a very high IQ have a ratio of 2-to-1.
There has been a very large increase in autism over the past generation. It is very hard to understand why.
Siblings who are unaffected have the same gaze avoidance and larger amygdalas.
The bases of autism are likely to lie in the brain's connections and pathways instead of a gene or single deficit in the brain.
Brains of parents of kids with autism differ from the brains of parents whose kid didn't have autism.
They had abnormalities in brain regions associated with social cognitive processes,
as well as having little or no activity in the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex.
It is believed that 80% of people with autism are mentally retarded, but this author believes that the data is not very accurate. She believes that half or more people with autism, it is impossible to test their intelligences because of their social setbacks. She believes more than half of people with autism are not mentally retarded.
One way that helps people with autism is that by training them to pay attention to facial expressions should increase activity in medial prefrontal cortex, part of the brain's mirror neuron network. Cognition.
There are two subgroups to autism defined by the degree of intellectual and social impairments, high and low functioning.
Parents say that kids with autism showed odd behaviors from infancy, such as crying less or crying more, being content to stare at inanimate objects, or not craving being held or cuddled. If diagnosed earlier, people can be more sensitive to the child's problems and needs.
Some of the parents with autistic children reported that after a vaccine, the child immediately began displaying symptoms of autism, even though the child knew hundreds of words before the vaccine. Many studies are continuing to study this.
One reason that it's hard to understand people with autism is that because they think in pictures, while most people use words and have feelings for those words. People and kids with autism are usually not interested in playing with others. They use gestures, but are sometimes hard to understand. Also, kids might use people's hands while playing with toys without even acknowledging them. Such as, they will take their parents' hands to move a car around, but they won't even say hi to them or look at them. People with bipolar disorder have trouble recognizing facial emotion, but it is very subtle. Bipolar disorder and autism could be coming from different brain regions mediated by different genes and different brain dysfunctions. Another thing to realize is that it could be difficult diagnosing someone with autism because there are problems defining a threshold between normal and autistic behavior. Environment.
In the 1940s, when autism was first founded, scientists thought that it was caused by bad parenting because children brought up in institutions had more autism, yet still autism occurred in some families.
Kids in institutions has little social interactions, so they become autistic. Scientists just assume that kids in families with autism were just neglected.
In autism, it could be that the desire for social connections is fully in contact, just that a person's ability to express it may be broken.
People with autism are not crazy like some people think. Some know how to read and write, and are quiet, but they can listen.
Kids with autism like to roll back and forth and flap their arms because sometimes they can't feel their body, but with the body motions it helps the kid feel themselves. Also, some young kids were fine one day and communicated and then suddenly drastically changed.
Now autism is becoming more widespread, with people knowing more about it. Even fiction books are depicting kids with autism now, which is another way people can understand more about the disease and have more sympathy, something an autistic child is struggling with.